What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the debut album by rapper Puff Daddy. Basically this product is called No Way Out and it came out in the summer of 1997. So the thing about this particular product is the concept behind this album here is just the fact that Puff Daddy was originally going to be in the same fold and pitch as like Notorious B.I.G. with what he was doing with like the mafioso type vibes that was starting to enter that fare. Some excellent type pitch. Had it not been for Biggie's death, I think this album probably would have been like a definite excellent second helping of like the Life After Death album that was a double album in like the spring of 1997. Definitely some excellent type fares for that. But the unfortunate aspect, just full blown, just as like a slap, just like some real atrophy that happened within rap music as a whole, was Biggie's unfortunate death in the early 1997, which was Biggie's death was the result of the East Coast West Coast beef from 1996 with Tupac's death and some of that type of the beef they got in 96 towards those pitch gonna happen. Now the reality behind it was Biggie traveled to California, which California was still kind of reeling off of Tupac's death in early 1997, and I guess it was kind of seen as like a little bit pompous of Biggie to kind of go there and just not care about, maybe not so much not care, but just kind of have what they probably perceived as like the nerve to go and be on Tupac's homeland, just within the pitch behind when they were still reeling from it. So it's just within that particular fare. But now look, after with this particular album, Puff Daddy, like Wikipedia says that there were two sides to the coin of this particular album. Basically Biggie is on this particular album. He has a number of features on here, but he didn't quite get to complete it. He worked on, I don't know the sheer amount of progress that he made on this particular product before he passed, but there are some verses on here. Now it doesn't have like the finishing touches obviously, but there are at least three or four verses. Biggie pops up on here at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 times within the pitch behind it, and the rest of like the Bad Boy Entertainment label is on here around that particular time. You even get some extra folks. Jay-Z and Foxy Brown are on here. Lil Kim's on here a couple of times. The R&B singer Carl Thomas is on here. I want to say he might have been on Bad Boy. Biggie's ex-wife Faith Evans is on here. The R&B singer that was on Bad Boy 112. The Lox is on here. Some of those type pairs. Busta Rhymes, who was kind of in his early stages. Mace, some of those type folks. It's just some excellent type pitch. Kind of get a lot of that. This is in the pitch behind it. But yeah, like I was saying, in terms like the before and after type fare, there's some songs that were kind of worked on before Biggie's death, which is kind of the concept of like what I was talking about with this having like a similar sheen to like the Life After Death album, which I think would have been like a second helping of that. There's some good notations that kind of particularly have that, but then there's also some aspects. It was just really like, I think as a whole, to kind of say like there are moments, I mean, apart from like probably I'll Be Missing You and like the No Way Out intro, for the most part it's not as much grievances within the tone behind it. There are a few songs like Pain and some of those type of ones, but probably the most heraldment, probably like the biggest attention grabbing type one in terms of the aspect of what kind of particularly happened with this, the grief of that particular times within the aspect behind it. In terms of contemporariness, would probably be one of Puff Daddy's biggest songs, which is I'll Be Missing You, just within the pitch behind it. That's the song that hit #1. It was just a predominant song throughout the summer of 1997, one of the biggest rap songs that was out of the 90s, and probably just as a continued highlight just in rap music in general as far as those pitches gonna happen. This album was a big deal. It's one of the highest selling rap albums of all time, went over 7 times platinum, some excellent type pitch. I think a lot of it just had to do with like the concept of just like probably I'll Be Missing You and some of those type ones, but this did get to the 5th single. It was pretty much a very popular type album just within the pitch behind it. The particular aspect was Puff Daddy kind of came about in like the shiny suit era, which Biggie was getting ready to be a part of within the end of his life, but didn't quite get to he didn't quite get to the aspect of being able to get towards that particular vibe that was going to be on songs like Mo Money, Mo Problems, and like Can't Nobody Hold Me Down, and It's All About the Benjamins, and some of those type of ones, and like Been Around the World, some of these type of pitches, and some of the songs off of Mace's album, some of those type of fairs that particularly kind of happen along with it. But Puff Daddy and Mace definitely represented this particular sound. They dominated 97, 98, and even a little bit of 99 within those fairs. But yeah, it's just, this is kind of a truncated type project, which is very unfortunate just because the concept, I think this is a virtual classic here. It's not going to quite get a full-blown classic score, but I would definitely say it's on the cusp. It's a very seminal 90s album from just 90s music in general, but definitely rap music I'd have to say. It was just kind of the concept. I feel like it's maybe just like a half song or something like that short of being like a true full-blown classic. I mean, for the most part it delivers upon the impact. 5 hit singles, the aspect of many album cuts that are just on here just in the pitch, has one that has several verses from one of the best rappers of all time, I'd say, within that particular fair. But it's just kind of within the impact as far as being able to say, you just look after the aspect that, I don't know, it's definitely, like, it competes with Life After Death. I feel like it's probably, in my opinion, this is probably a better album than Biggie's Ready to Die. I'd have to say that's a revolutionary album just because it brought Biggie into the fold, but I would definitely say this is probably the better album in terms of just what it did. It's the execution of some of these types of songs, and it's the way that these particular songs just had their atmosphere and digest as far as those pitches going to happen. Just even though Puff Daddy is not really a lyricist, he was kind of similar to Dr. Dre, how he just had his lyrics written for him. It's just within the aspect that he had the pizzazz and the flair enough to be able to kind of be like, not quite like the Flavor Flav. I feel like Puff Daddy probably has like some degree of like compellingness within his lyrics as far as those pitches, but definitely like the pizzazz of just having the charisma and just more relying upon that in like a 90s type fare where Biggie was like the lyrical demon within the pitch. But they made a good combo. It's just a good pitch. I think definitely if there had been more combination type albums with Biggie living to the concept of appearing on more of Puff Daddy's albums down the road, I think it would have been a classic combination that would have continued to be dominant. I think Bad Boy would have been even larger just within those pitches. Would have been some excellent type fare, especially just wondering what this album would have turned out like. It probably would have been damn well like as good as like Life After Death. I think this definitely would have been like probably like a full-blown classic. Just, I mean, it is with the pitch behind it, but I think the impact probably would have been that more severe if we would have gotten some of those typical kind of Biggie remixes that he did with like the One More Chance remix and some of those type of ones that he did in 1995. Some of those type fairs, I would definitely say it probably would have happened with this particular album. I would have seen some of those remixes. Just possibilities are sky high as far as those pitches can happen. But yeah, we'll get to this album here. So, just I'd say there's 5 singles. Most of these songs hit number 1 or number 2 on the charts. This album was pretty commercially successful. Is a big reason why it hit 7 times platinum. I think all of these singles, with the exception of Victory, were top 1 or top 2 singles. I'll be missing you and Can't Nobody Hold Me Down both hit number 1. I want to say like All About the Benjamins might have hit number 2. Don't remember what that one hit. And Been Around the World hit number 2. Victory hit like the top 20. So I'll just check and see what All About the Benjamins did. Yeah, All About the Benjamins hit number 2 on the Billboard 100, so that's an excellent type fare, but we'll go ahead and talk about these. So Can't Nobody Hold Me Down. This rips like the same sample that Ice Cube ripped off of Check Yourself from his 1992 album The Predator. Excellent type fare here. It's like a jazzy kind of 90s staple of a song kind of get. I'd probably say that the impactful, I feel like the Puff Daddy song just has a little bit more flair, but even though the Ice Cube song is probably better, I just look within the pitch. This one's just a little bit more woozy. It's more single ready just within the pitch behind it. It has a little bit more vanilla aspect about it. This is like a woozy kind of shiny suit era kind of club bop kind of get here, and this is definitely like a good song to pop champagne and stunt to just within those pitches behind it. So it's just classic type of appeal within it. It's kind of this is kind of a dreary type album just within the aspect behind it. Just I didn't realize how relatively drowsy it kind of is. There's some songs in here like Can't Nobody Hold Me Down. I feel like Ice Cube's version of this song just was a little bit more in the fray and just a little bit more frenetic and snappy, but this particular one just kind of has like a relatively glazed type buzz about it, and it's kind of the same thing with Been Around the World and songs like Don't Stop What You're Doing, some of those type of tones, and even like the floatiness of Young G's that had to say. Interesting type flair, but that's a good concept there. So that's a song that hit number 1. Big deal about that one. There's a big deal about that particular one, definitely a hitting one. I'll Be Missing You is the second single. Now this might definitely be one of Puff Daddy's most signature songs. This is like the song that defines like the grief that he went through when Biggie died in the spring of 1997. This continues to be a highlight, and it's pretty much one of his most monetizing songs in terms of the aspect of how much loot that this particular song. It's not to say that it was a cash grab, it's just within the pitch as far as saying that this is very impactful. Great song to kind of harness that particular aspect, just because, you know, Snoop Dogg and some of those type folks didn't really do a song like this for Tupac, so it's just within the fair getting some of this type of appeal of just, you know, the concept it just makes for like a classic. This particular song just makes for like a classic kind of reminisce type song. And yeah, that's what to describe this song. It's like a classic kind of reminisce tune for fallen homies and pitches like that. I'd say just some malaise kind of car traverse to kind of get here. It's kind of some rainy day vibe and kind of have within that impact. So it's just a real nice one. Just kind of takes the appeal of just having, it's a real dredgy type day just within the impact. This bad hair day, some of that type fair, just the impact of just having like the concept of just grief and some of that type fair just within the pitch was real signature. Now this was a very sharp song back in the 90s. Just the pitch behind it, this was very revolutionary of a song to kind of get within that tone. Just really nailed it. separating this particular style from like G-Funk. Puff Daddy in this particular time in like the 90s, between him, Biggie, and Mace, some of those type folks, they would sample songs and get to some of that type fare. This song samples The Police, which is pretty excellent type pitch, kind of get that. But this is just a style that was revolutionary within the time, because there weren't songs like this around this particular time. Just impactful, not just for what happened in the lyrics and what happened in like Biggie and Puffy's life, but just the concept of also switching the style away from G-Funk that was kind of real, and from Tupac's death and Dr. Dre leaving Death Row and some of those type of pitches. So it's an excellent type fare, really impactful type song, 90s staple for sure. It's All About the Benjamins is the third single. Now this is a real nice one here. It's like a sharper kind of lyrical flex tune to kind of get within that tone. Just East Coast giants on this particular song. Definitely some pinstripe music to kind of get here, and some noir like jazz kind of have on this particular song. So this is a mafioso type album. Like I was saying, very much in the same vein as Biggie's Life After Death. If you like what Biggie was doing with that particular album and you need like a second helping of that, this is that album to kind of have within the next window of that. Just some extra kind of cousins of that particular style. All About the Benjamins. I like this song pretty full blown. The Locks are on here, Lil Kim is on here, so the only person that's not on this song that's within that group is just Styles P. You get Chic Luch, Jadakiss, Lil Kim on here, and then Biggie and Puff Daddy. But the problem with Biggie's verse on this song, Biggie definitely tears this song apart, but the unfortunate thing is they switched the beat. I feel like the beat at the beginning of the song with the first four rappers is just better than the version of the beat that Biggie was particularly on. I think that kind of particularly happened just because of Biggie's death, trying to make it more elegant, but this was the concept. I feel like it just did the opposite of that particular PR. I like that particular song, but I think it probably would have been that much more excellent if Biggie had just shredded apart that song like in the normal format. That's pretty much my only complaint about that song, but it's still some excellent type fare. Another 90s staple to kind of get that one. This is a surprising song that charted pretty heavily. This is like a popular song just with the impact of it. I'm going to check the Spotify popularity. Yeah, It's All About the Benjamins had approximately 70 million plays. That's some good type fare. It's a pretty relatively popular song, and this is the concept that this album did have the singles. A real excellent song on here has Been Around the World. This has both Biggie and Mace on there. Biggie doesn't actually drop a verse on here, but he is on the chorus. Has some good type of appeals that he was kind of doing that sort of stuff. It's like a drowsy kind of Traverse Bliss to kind of get here, I'd have to say. Just a grand kind of late single. This fourth single that was another one that hit like top 3 on the Billboard 100, top 2 even. Just within the pitch, I'd have to say, just bright city lights definitely on this particular song, and this is like some sensory kind of dreariness to kind of get here. So it's just kind of a sensory overload, just kind of the sluggish type of appeal, same sort of jazzy, same sort of dreary, just kind of after effect of like Can't Hold Me Down. Can't Nobody. It's that same kind of dreary after effect of like Can't Nobody Hold Me Down, I'd have to say, within that pitch. Now this is a pretty rock solid song here, and I liked this song back in the day because I liked the Mad Rapper skit. That was really funny, just the pitch behind it. I used to really enjoy those Mad Rapper skits. He started out on Biggie's Life After Death album, and that cat, he just gets pissed off for just the most random reasons. I mean, it makes sense within the pitch, but that he definitely was a good character to kind of have within those aspects. It's a good concept kind of. There needs to be like skit characters on rap albums like that again. Like Eminem had Ken Kniff, but Biggie had the Mad Rapper, and he was definitely pretty damn funny within the pitch. Just the way that he would get pissed off, and the concept behind it on this particular song. I remember that there's actually like a cousin or a brother like the Mad Rapper. There's another person that's like the Mad Rapper, and he gets even angrier than the Mad Rapper. I don't remember his name, but he is on that song, so that was pretty funny stuff on there. But Victory is the 5th single, and this is another one that has Biggie on there, and this also has Busta Rhymes. This is like a thoroughly vicious kind of lyrical snarl to kind of get here. Biggie particularly shreds this song, probably one of his best verses just overall. I'd have to say just really eviscerates the song. This is like, yeah, Biggie definitely shreds the song pretty heavily. Definite career highlight for Puff Daddy, I'd have to say here, and this is like a very dark shrouding type one to kind of get within that impact. So it's just within the tone. Great sample on this particular song. It's another nice one that has like a vintage kind of sample from like the 70s or 80s and pitches like that. But this one, along with I'll Be Missing You, are probably some of Puffy's best songs, I'd have to say. But then really all of the singles are just excellent. These are some ones that were all top 2. Most of these singles were top 2 singles, and Victory was kind of one that hit top 20 just within the pitch behind it. It's really not that radio friendly. It's not as vanilla and pop rap within the appeal, but it's just the way that Biggie kind of shreds apart this song, and Puffy really backs him up on the particular song. They both do so excellent on here. It's just some good type fare, great stuff. But yeah, this is virtually a classic album. I'd have to say. So out of 15 songs on here, basically on the standard edition, There's 18 songs, but minus the Been Around the World radio mix that narrows it down to 17, and minus like the interlude, which is with Carl Thomas, that narrows it down to 16. So basically, out of those 16 songs, I wound up recommending 12. So there's 4 songs I don't recommend, one of which is the intro. Basically, the intro is a little bit too religious on this particular one. I did like the production fair and the kind of hauntingness, but I just feel like Puffy's kind of relatively just get on your knees and pray type altitude was just not quite as affable within the pitch behind it. I mean, I realized that he was just kind of amidst that, but I feel like it just probably, I don't know, it was just, I kind of almost question if it would have been something more interesting that he could have talked about on that particular fair. Just seeing like the choppers overhead and just that standard gloom on the song just didn't have as much affableness about it. And now look, after the other 3 songs I don't recommend on here would just be Do You Know. The other 3 songs would be Do You Know, I Love You Baby, and Friend with Foxy Brown. So basically, I didn't recommend the concept of Friend with Foxy Brown just because this particular one was just supposed to be like a jazzy kind of penthouse type music, but it just didn't pull off the vibe that well. It's supposed to be like a more comfy type song, but just the aspect, the sample in that particular song was just not that affable. This was not that engaging to listen. And I feel like Do You Know is just kind of like, I feel like Do You Know is just kind of like some homely type music that just didn't have the appeal as much. Now, this is very much noir-like music, mafioso, Goodfellas type vibes just within the pitch behind it, but I just feel like the relative homely type fare in just like a more graceful sense. And normally some of these songs would probably be pulled off, but probably the production fare on that particular one is just a little bit more relaxed. It just didn't nail the vibe nearly as well. Just didn't have as much affability towards it. And then I Love You Baby was just kind of like some restaurant type music in a more graceful type sense. I mean, if you look after it just for like some good, just kind of like not necessarily chauvinistic, but just kind of more out and about, just kind of in a more blue blood type sense, just type tone for just something like more 4-star, 3-star type restaurants within that pitch. It kind of has some relative affability, but just didn't really nail it nearly as well as some of those type fares. I just question, like when you think of a song by Biggie, like What's Beef, even though that wasn't a restaurant type song, I just feel like the violins and the way that kind of particular mafioso type vibe was just nailed. I just feel like the selection for how that particular song just worked just didn't have the same flair about it, but just kind of thing. So yeah, this album's going to get a 9.75 out of 10 just within the pitch. I feel like 12 out of 15 just within the cusp. I feel like this would be a classic. I just am on the cusp of doing it, but I just look after it. I don't know. I'm trying to think as to the reason why it wouldn't be as much. I just look after the tone. It has the makings of a classic, I'd have to say, within here. It really might just boil down to the intro just not being one. I just think that might be the aspect of just as far as me just not having as much affability with the intro, but it just is within the appeal behind it that I do feel like this album probably should have nailed this maybe like a hair better just within the pitch. I mean, it's more just nitpicking just within the tone as far as saying like the real aspects behind it, but it does have some of these moments on here, but I just look after it like somewhat felt like a song short as far as this pitch can happen. Definitely had the appeal behind it, but yeah, I still would say 9.75 is just within the pitch behind it. It's just more personable. It just feels like it's a song shy as far as this pitch can happen. Just more personal complaints that I'd say. But the rest of these songs on here, Don't Stop What You're Doing is a real excellent type one. If this album had more songs like that, I definitely would have said that this probably would have been like that .25 score to get like a 10 out of 10. This is a good combination with Lil Kim on here. Nice jewelry, kind of pop rap, commerce, kind of get within that tone. Just a Seldom, looks like a Seldom kind of Lil Kim team up, I'd have to say here, and a nice bouncer to kind of get. It's a pretty good club bop to kind of have on here just within that relative impact. It's nice, thrilling type one. I've listened to this song a lot in the past. It's a real nice highlight. Probably one of my more favorite songs off this particular album that I continue to listen to. Just some excellent type fare. If you're looking for another Biggie appearance, Young G's is a pretty nice one here. This also has Jay-Z. It's like some extra drive to kind of get within that tone. Just a good snag to get both Jay-Z and Biggie on a song around the time when they were just in their early days. It's a very excellent aspect that Puffy went to the trouble of getting this particular team up just because the Jay-Z and Biggie team up from '96, which was, forget the name of that song, but it was Unreasonable Doubt. I think it was, forget the name of that particular song, but it's real excellent type one. So it's good that there was at least another. There's at least 3 Jay-Z and Biggie songs kind of get there, both lyrical shredding, and they competed with each other, so it's an excellent type fare. This is like some definite floaty kind of elevator music, I'd have to say here. It just has finesse and it's very suave about it, just within the tone, I'd have to say. It's a good aspect. This just feels like the sort of song you'd listen to on a long way up on an elevator, some of that type fare, just going from like the 2nd floor to like the 10th or something like that, just within the pitch behind it, some of those type fares within it. It's real nice noir type music once again. Good, nice, big city, New York kind of gracefulness. I Got the Power is a nice one. This has the Locks on there. It's like an electro kind of club posse song, I would definitely feel like here. Puff Daddy should have definitely dropped the verse on this particular song. He's only on the chorus. There's another song I continue to listen to. It's a good bop to kind of get this one. It's like, the song is definitely like a fresh and kind of basic town outing jive to kind of get within that pitch behind it. So this is like some nice sparkle to kind of have on this particular one. It's kind of a nice thump of, it's kind of some some nice pizzazz kind of get about this song in particular as far as that kind of goes. This really feels like a song that you would just kind of introduce your crew as far as those pitches kind of happen. It's a more kind of just like more of like riff rap and banter type music to kind of get within that particular tone behind it. Just a basic step out, but just kind of within the more kind of entry type phases of it, just within the tone behind how those pitches kind of happen. So some good type flair. Pain is a nice one here. It's like a glazed and brooding kind of Dracula-like mafioso glimmer to kind of get about this particular one. Just gives some life after death vibes. I definitely have to say here, and this is like a good contemplate cut to kind of get within that tone. So yeah, this is a very brooding type one. I do like the night commerce of this particular song. Just some good, excellent impacts about this song, Pain here. I mean, this is particularly a little bit more darker than the concept of some of the stuff that Biggie kind of did. Like, I feel like the Biggie vibe about it was definitely, it had some broodiness on that particular album, but it was not quite as much, like, more in, like, the horror type sense. I just feel like this is a little bit more of, like, a crisp type aspect where it just, it just didn't feel like Biggie was as much ghastly compared to this particular song. It just being, like, a real kind of, like, this horrified type song within the pitch of Pain, something like that. There's also another one that's like that. It's like, Is This the End? That's another one that kind of has that particular crispness about it. But we'll go ahead and talk about Is This the End? This is a real nice one here. Now this is one where Puppy kind of rips like the style of Twista and Do or Die on this particular song, but it is a good, nice one to kind of get here. It's one of the ones that stands out the most in terms of like the normal flair and this cadence of the album, but it is a nice one. This is like a clock ticking gem to kind of get here. I feel like this really feels like a waiting, kind of checking your watch type song. Very nerve-wracking and moody kind of evening dredge kind of get off this particular one. Some great autumn brush kind of get here, and it's very crisp type one to kind of have within that. So it's just some excellent type flair about it. It's really one. This would have been a great song to have had Biggie on just within the fair. I just really like the emphasis of the goosebumps kind of giving type feel of this particular song, just with the impact behind it. It's very strengthy type song, kind of have within that appeal. Has a nice flares about it. Production fair is pretty great on there. What You Gonna Do is a nice one as well. It's like a very similar tenor to like Somebody's Gotta Die from Biggie's Life After Death album, one of those initial songs that you hear off that project. Same sort of cadence, same sort of pitch, same sort of vibe and flavor about that as far as those pitches kind of happen. So we're talking about with this album kind of being a cousin of that, and it's like a dope kind of mafioso kind of evening brush kind of get here. So some more good concepts within that flair. Kind of like it's basically like an expansion pack of like Life After Death, I'd have to say, just within that continued type flair. Good type concepts. A lot of these just particularly have that appeal. And then Senorita is a nice one as well. So this is like a drooping kind of city errands, kind of heading to like night joints, I would have to say about this particular tune. Just some basic kind of initial dap and greet as far as those pitches kind of happen. Just some after hours kind of wake up to kind of have. So I do like all this night brush on here. Some of these type ones, Senorita, What You Gonna Do, Senorita, What You Gonna Do, Pain, Is This the End? I'd say some of those type of flares. Just the real aspect of just having some of these brushy type ones. Now some of these songs I didn't listen to as much back in the day, but I do like the appeal of a lot of these. It's kind of having that relative just kind of ghastly, just looking like the album cover, the way that all these folks are kind of in black suits and kind of more looking like they're heading to a funeral, some pitches like that just within the tone. Just really has that aspect of just really looking grim within the sense behind it. Just some good type flares. I do like that particular theme of this particular album. Songs like those 4 songs I listed, plus songs like some of the appeal of like, the appeal of like I'll Be Missing You, and then if the intro would have been executed better, some of those type flares would definitely have it. But it kind of has the appeal of kind of switching between like pop rap kind of jazz, like the Shiny Suit era, but really this full-blown album is not completely amidst that style. It does have kind of like Life After Death vibes like Biggie did, with also like some Shiny Suit era type stuff, and maybe that's what Wikipedia meant when it said that it was kind of 2 sides of a coin, but it's just within the pitch. Some of this is nailed. Yeah, it's a great swirl of an album. This is more, it just boils down to more personal type fare. I just probably feel like I should have liked the intro a little bit more. That's the main pitch behind it, but I just look after it. Just within the impact of being able to say that's the excellence of it, 9.75. So the social score I will probably give like a 10 out of 10 though, just within the flair behind all these guests on here, all this folks, some prime era Biggie verses. This is Biggie in 97, so the last stuff that he did in his lifetime, so some excellent type fare. Lil Kim's on here with some good type flair. Jay-Z is on here in his prime. Like the Locks are on here, which is Jadakiss, Chic Luch, and Styles P, some of those type of folks. Bass does some pretty good verses on here. He definitely tears this album apart. He's a underappreciated lyricist, that has to say. At least he was before he found God, and some of those type fares. The way he was in 97, 98 was pretty vicious. Some good pitches like that. So just the social scores on here. Basically, you get about 2 styles off this. You get the Shiny Suit era Puff Daddy, which is the pop rap kind of day life and nightclub type dance type music to kind of get within some of that just pizzazz of like makeshift and white collar type nest, and then you get like the more mafioso kind of nightlife, just in a more grim type aspect, a more restaurant and just I guess to say chauvinist, just kind of restaurant chauvinistic, or just restaurant kind of chauvinistic, just kind of outings, just in like a graceful type sense, just of like some blue blood type candor, and just like the Goodfellas type vibe within the pitch. So some good type flares for that. So it's a good aspect. 10 out of 10 social. In terms of the future, that's kind of difficult because Puff Daddy is in prison with all the drama that's been going on with him in 2024 as far as those pitches going to happen. Just within the standard aspect of what's been happening there, this would have to kind of say this was definitely a very poignant album, and I question if like the further albums had this particular impact without Biggie and Puffy and some of those type folks and the rest of the Bad Boy crew. But I would have to say that this is a classic just within the impact of it. It's just more personable complaints once again. That's why it's not getting a 10 out of 10. But I just look within the flair. The impact is very high. Just being able to say that seminal project out of the 90s staple, and just easy enough to kind of see that this deserves to go 7 times platinum and just be like an all-time great and like the highest selling rap albums.